So, Need for Speed Unbound.
Welcome to Lakeshore. You have to be this tall to ride.
Bye. Oh shit. Oh god.
I'm doing this.
Oh Christ.
I'm literally doing this right now.
Nailed it.
Alright, let's just get this over with. Come on. Bust me. Bruh.
AWD engaging.
What are you doing? Yeah, it's a 7.
Perfect. Welcome back in, everybody, for another edition of J&J, the Game Boys. We're coming at you with episode 3 already. Today we're going to be discussing the most recent Need for Speed game in the 25-game installment, Need for Speed Unbound. So I guess we'll start it off with John, if you want to give the people at home a little plot summary of the game.
Yeah, so this is actually the 25th installment of the Need for Speed series. We fact-checked that. I actually don't know if it is the 25th. It could be. Basically what happens is that there's the two main characters. They're unable to stop a robbery at a family auto shop. The two friends are pushed to a breaking point, giving the player an opportunity to make their mark in the streets, to go from rookie to top racer by winning the Grand and reclaiming a stolen custom car. Player has to take risks, get attention, and then make their choices by pulling huge drifts, taking on Lakeshore Police Department, placing side bets on rivals. The more attention means more heat coming their way.
Uh-oh. A little bit of key game info for you. This is another relatively newer game. This came out in December 2022, so just a few months ago. Developers were Criterion Games, who have done a lot of the Need for Speed games, not the last couple prior to this, but they've done some in the past as well. IGN gave it a rating of a whopping 7 out of 10, aka good. And as John mentioned, the genre is a racing game. So for the people listening, obviously you guys are familiar with like Forza Horizon. The new one just came out of that within the last year. F-Zero GX, and then obviously Need for Speed is probably the most well-known. John, you probably got a better background in this genre than I do, so I'll let you answer this. But do you generally like the racing game genre? And like, what are some things that make or break it?
I do. I really like any type of racing game. I think one thing for me is that I love more street racing games rather than traditional real life legal racing. Yeah, I love Need for Speed Underground, Need for Speed Most Wanted back in the day, Need for Speed Carbon, after Carbon, and that's where it kind of started falling off for me.
Did you have any initial thoughts on this game or any expectations going in from what you'd heard?
So for me, it was like I mentioned, I stopped playing after Carbon, and that was like the holy trinity: Need for Speed Underground, then Need for Speed Most Wanted, then Need for Speed Carbon. And then after that, it kind of they just kind of lost their way of kind of what makes a good Need for Speed game. They always had the racing down, but they just never had a good story to back it up. I heard this was a return to formula. Did it live up to that? We'll discuss that.
Get into the difficulty options if you want to talk a little bit about what those looked like in this game.
Yeah, so there's easy, medium, hard. It basically just has two main effects. It just makes the other racers harder, obviously, and then it also gives you a limited number of restarts. So easy gives you more restarts, medium gives you less than easy, and then hard gives you, I think, only like 1 or 2. And basically just what those restarts is maybe you're just not doing a race well. You have to buy into these races. You have to spend, and if you're losing the race, especially in a winner takes all race, you definitely want to keep those restarts and use them if you can. I use pretty much all of my restarts every single day.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Anytime I was taking a second, I'm like, I can beat that guy.
Yeah.
So, all right. So moving into How Long to Beat, our favorite go-to website for picking games and stuff. Looks like online, this kind of surprised me, but it's listed as for the main and extras estimation at around 28 hours. So not completionist, but getting through like a lot of the side stuff. Did that feel accurate to you, or?
I had 12 hours in the game.
Yeah, I don't even think I was at that. I remembered I hit over 10, but I think it was in the 11-hour range, so I don't know where the 28 hours is based off of. But so based on the length of time that we actually played versus the online prediction, how'd you feel about it? Like, did it drag in certain parts, or did you wish it was longer?
So, I mean, I thought the length was great. It was 12 hours for me in a game that I was expecting to put 20 to 30 hours in. One thing for me is that I was planning to not do any of the side collectible things and side races until the end of the game. You know, I felt like there were a lot of options and races on what to do. Out of all those races that you can choose from, there's only like 3 or 4 that are even worthwhile for the money.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do the one that gives you the most money. And if there was days, which there were a lot, that don't have a money of value that I thought was worth it, I would just skip the day. And I think that's what sped this game for me. You can't skip a day, but what you can do is drive head first into a cop car, and then they bust you, and then it skips the day when you get busted. So towards the end of the qualifier, you need $200,000, and if there's a race that's $10,000, I'm like, well, that's not worth it.
Yeah,
But then
what's the point?
but then the next day it would be, oh, here's a race that's worth $80,000. It's like, okay, yeah, let's do that.
I just didn't, and we'll cover it in a little bit, but I really didn't like the format that they had where it was week to week. Again, we'll cover that a little bit later, but it just felt like it was very monotonous, like same thing each day. Oh, wake up, I pick a race, okay, I'm done. Okay, I'm gonna pick another race. So like you said, I wish there would have been more things done with the side activities. Like if it was, okay, on Wednesdays you got to do a challenge to take some heat off of other racers, so you have to get into a 4-star cop chase, or you have to go do this other thing. Like I just think I wish there were more things versus pick the most expensive race, rinse and repeat. So getting into the game features themselves, which this one actually did well in a few different areas. Interesting for a racing game and a little bit different was they had a day and night system throughout the entire story. So essentially day races were looked at as the cops were kind of just letting things happen, and you weren't going to be at risk for getting busted or adding more heat. But at night the races were worth more money, even though they drew more cop attention. So you can rack up a lot of money, but then you basically have to get away from like a huge cop chase right after the fact, which you could lose all of it right there. So
I felt like every single race, no matter what, had a cop chase. And it was a little comical at some points where, you know, you're just going on a random race. Oh, here's a cop car. Next race you do, oh, there's a cop car. And I guess for you're driving in the middle of the street, so I guess it makes sense. But there was some where you're driving in the middle of nowhere, and then you get a cop car.
yeah, it makes sense. The game itself was, I guess, classified kind of as an open world. I mean, it was a small area, but it was one city. You could pretty much go anywhere you wanted from the beginning of the game, which was nice. So it wasn't like I've seen some other games where it's just, oh, this downtown area is locked off until further use. Like that's not realistic. You're driving in a car. You should be able to go wherever you need to. So I liked that, and I liked that there were different terrains in it. So like depending on what race you took, you might be doing like a high speed race through a mountain where there's tons of curvy roads and you got to get good at drifting, or you were down like a rural area and it was just like a basic lap, so it was all whoever had the fastest car. Off-road, stuff like that. Like I liked that there was some variety to it. It wasn't just like the exact same race setup, which was cool.
One thing about it was interesting was that there were pedestrians all over the city.
Oh yeah.
I was kind of confused. It was an interesting thing where I was curious if it's the thing that kind of creates realism, because there should be pedestrians in the street, but also at the same time I would have actually preferred that there were none. And I wonder how much design space that takes up when making a game. Like, okay, we got to make pedestrians in this game, because yeah, one thing for me, I was like, they're all just dodging every car, and I was like,
it kind of seemed like there was no point, because it wasn't like it wasn't like you were getting heat for accidentally hitting a pedestrian or anything like that. It was just like, okay, a quirky little thing, I guess, to make the city feel more alive, but it was so unrealistic how they would dodge you at the last second too. So
yeah, talking about the heat system, we talked about kind of the cop chases, how there's that risk to it, especially when you get higher heat. And basically how the heat system works is that the cops are a little more difficult to escape as it goes on. You know, heat level 1, cops are terrible at their job. They'll just drive away from you. You know, if you stand it completely still, they will drive away from you. So you don't even need to do anything. Heat level 2, there will be cars and SUVs. They'll try and ram you. They're a little more aggressive, but still nothing too terrible. 3 is where it starts getting a little bit more difficult, because they'll have faster cars. You know, there's more cars out there. They'll come for you quicker. You got a little more spike strips and roadblocks. So it's where you start having to dodge things. 4 will be when you get
a helicopter?
kind of just following you around. So even if you lose the cars, you still got this helicopter that you have to wait out until it needs to go get gas. And then 5 is where every car is faster. Cop cars that are undercover racing cars, so they're extremely fast. They're all really aggressive, so they'll ram you off the road. Helicopters are still there. They're still annoying. So heat level 5 is where it gets really difficult, where you start sweating a little bit.
Yeah, you have to do the whole lean forward in the chair and say, okay, I got to pay attention now. I felt like 1, the way you described it, and like when I was playing, whenever you would pass the cops, they would literally say, and then it would just disappear as you passed them. So it reminded me of the old like Assassin's Creed and different style games where they're like,
Genuine Balmer blood elixir. You shouldn't leave weapons laying around. Someone could get hurt if I made myself clear. See that it doesn't happen again. Get out of here.
did you ever get caught in any of the 5-star races, or were there any times where you got busted not intentionally?
So there was one where I did, I think just because I drove through a spike strip and I was like trying to make my way to a gas station to repair. So in the game, gas stations are how you repair. You just drive through the gas station, you know, get a Diet Coke, get a little repair, and then you're good to go. So that's what I was trying to do, and then ended up getting rammed by someone else and then got pinned in. So
Yeah, that was the only time it ever happened. I went to the point where anytime I saw a spike strip, I like over panicked and was like, I'm driving off the side of this mountain so that I don't hit it. But
I think one
Yeah.
thing too that I wish was a little different was, you know, in the old games when you're doing, you know, you have to go through roadblocks. You have no choice but to
Yeah.
go through roadblocks. Whereas in this one, I felt like if I saw on the map, oh, there's a roadblock, but there's 4 different directions I can go, and I was like, okay, I'll just turn.
so many streets in the entire city, it just
Yeah.
was like, or like it was so easy to go off-road and like you're driving, unless it's a big tree, you can just drive through it and nothing happens. So anyways, moving into the different types of like races and events that they had. Obviously you had the standard races, so it was either like a sprint or a circuit type of thing where you just had to buy in with a certain amount of money, and you could race up to 7 other people for an 8-person race. You could also do little side bets to just guarantee, like, okay, I'm gonna beat this one person for an extra 1,000 or whatever it is. They had Takeover, which was essentially like a demolition derby, for lack of a better word, where it wasn't about how quickly you finished it. It was just that you got to run a race solo, competing against 3 other people's scores, and just see how many different things you could crash, how many points you could get for drifting or spin outs or whatever, and just kind of combo the damage. Specific drifting challenges where it had nothing to do, again, with you winning a race. It was just a matter of you getting like longer time drifting throughout the entire lap, and how you could turn one drift into a different direction. Head-to-heads where it was just one-on-one, which those got pretty intense. Usually it was either for a high dollar amount or a car. And then delivery events, so you could either go and pick up a vehicle that had like high heat on it and get away from the cops without damaging it, or you'd have to pick up a driver and then avoid police cars throughout the entire city to get to them to some safe house. So did you have like a favorite of those, or what'd you think?
The 2 of my favorite, I didn't like the delivering people to the safe house. I didn't care for that one. The delivery was fun, especially the delivery where you had to basically have the car in pristine condition, just
Oh,
because
yeah.
it was a little more of a challenge. I thought that was really fun. But
Wild
basically,
cops are chasing you.
yeah, while
Yeah.
cops are chasing you. It was basically my strategy of just drive like an asshole, and then like when I'm about to get away, just pop into a gas station.
That's so smart. We found my every game gap in knowledge that I never figured out to do.
Oh god, Jack.
I never did that. I was just like, okay, I guess I'll get gold. Like, I got gold in probably 90% of them, but I never went to a gas station. Well, every game we have one where Jack just makes it harder on himself.
Oh boy. What about you? What was your favorite?
Yeah, I was going to say the same. The reason I liked the delivery events for the cars was because, especially early on, it gave you a variety to try, like, what you liked and didn't like. So when you only had a B tier car, but you'd have a chance to, like, drive this A+, you're like, it helped me learn, okay, do I prefer more, like, the drifting or more of, like, the hugging the tar in the street to, like, take tight corners. So that was fun. Hated the Takeover. I really didn't, like, put a lot of time into it. The drifting challenge seemed impossible to me. So I guess the only other ones would have been like the standard races. I really liked like the high speed ones where it felt like a lot longer race and you were going through highway on straight lines. So it was that one felt like a lot more punishing if you got into an accident because everybody was driving 200 miles an hour and it was very tough to control. So
I think the takeover was my surprising one that I thought I wouldn't like at all, but I actually really enjoyed. I think the reason I didn't like drifting was because I couldn't continue a drift long enough to keep my
you lose it.
multiplier. Yeah, so I lost my multiplier all the time. Whereas the takeover, at least, like, you know, if you drift, that adds to your multiplier. If you hit something, adds to the multiplier. And I just thought those were like kind of soothing and a little fun. I thought they were really easy, but it was like just fun to just do.
Yeah, and I should preface it. I think I did one of them. So like I'm sure if I spent more time or like actually looked up how to do it well, it probably would have been more fun. But I did it and was just like, I think I'd rather just race.
Yeah.
So
I can't believe someone had to go back after someone did a race. They were like, okay, let's go set them all back.
yeah, how much of a pain for that?
Yeah.
Everybody walking or watching, standing around. I'm like, that seems really boring for
Yeah.
you. But another big component in the racing in the game overall was the nitro boost system, which is obviously pretty common in a lot of racing games. But I liked this one, and you can tell me how common that is or what they did differently. But I liked how this one you could basically gain it throughout the race by doing different things. So obviously like drifting around corners, which you get really good at by the end, drafting other cars, so sitting behind them and just kind of getting the speed boost from that, but then also building up your nitro boost, near misses, so you could intentionally drive like right next to oncoming traffic and just miss them, and that would boost it a ton. And then stuff like airtime too, so if you went off of jumps and you were at a high enough speed to sail, that would boost it up a lot too. So any thoughts on that? I don't know how common that is in most games.
In other Need for Speed games that I played, it's basically just you have your set amount of nitrous and then it just recharges over time. I think this nitro boost system was awesome because it rewards you for driving well or doing certain things. Like there would be a lot of times where I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to try and get ahead of this guy because I want to get the full nitro boost from drafting behind him. And I thought that stuff like that is really cool. And I like the whole use it or lose it type thing, you know, because there would be times where, well, I don't really want to use the nitrous here because I feel like I'm going to crash.
Yeah. Going into like a hard
Yeah,
corner or whatever, it's just not worth it. But you felt so like dissatisfied where you're like, oh, I just wasted all of that boost already. So
Yeah.
all right, well, moving into the skill tree and progression system that we'll talk about with pretty much every game. This one, obviously not so much a skill tree, but progression in terms of upgrading. What were your thoughts on the upgrade system as a whole?
So I think at first glance, it's like, oh, this is really cool. There's a lot of different parts that you can choose from, a lot of different engines, a lot of different just components to choose. And I felt like it meant nothing. At first glance, I was like, oh, this is great. But then at the end, I was like, well, you get your total car rating. And, you know, I think it was, 380 is like the top car, right? Or was it 280?
I had like 399,
Yeah.
400 by the end, yeah.
So you basically, I was just like, okay, well, what upgrade gives the higher number? That's what I picked. And yeah, it was just like, it's just, each item is just, they're just a better version of it. So you don't have really much in thought process going into it. You're just like, okay, well, let me upgrade my basic engine to a pro engine, and then let me upgrade my pro engine to a sport engine.
Yeah, like you said, when I first started it out, it was like, wow, it's nice that there's so much customization, but once you get down to it, it felt like a very like streamlined, narrow path of like, these are clearly the best options to pick. So it wasn't like by the end, I feel like everybody has the exact same car, so it's not really a nice variety.
Yeah.
And then even the vehicles themselves, there was like something like 50 different vehicles you could pick from. All of them were pretty much either like $2 million that you couldn't afford, or you would just get a better car by playing through the game and getting like winning ones in the big races. So it really didn't have a point. Going into the graphics, which I feel like is one thing where you can actually be excited to talk about. I will say that I had the thoughts throughout because it was very, very flashy and like cartoony with effects, and I don't mean that in a bad way. The way that I thought of it was it felt very much like Into the Spider-Verse, Miles Morales style, for those of you that are familiar with that, where it was just like, it was a focus on music and like the kind of almost comic booky effects of giant smoke billowing out, or like your car when you would go off the jumps, it would have like a little like neon wings on the side, or, you know, stuff like that. So I felt like that added to it, and it actually made it very fun and refreshing to play for me. Do you have any thoughts on graphics and stuff overall?
Yeah, I think, when the game trailer first came out, that was everyone's first thought, they were like, whoa, these graphics are a little interesting. And, you know, it's one thing where if the game's good, who cares? It's interesting because you're going from, you know, the cars and everything in the atmosphere, the environment looked all really realistic. And then you have the cartoony aspect of it in the cutscenes, and then also in the, you know, the nitrous boost and when you get in the air and then like the wings come out, stuff like that. I kind of liked it. I didn't mind it at all. It didn't really bother me. It was just kind of within the first 5 minutes of playing the game, I was like, okay, that's cool. And then it just faded from my memory. That
Yeah, didn't really stand out. You didn't notice it after a while, so.
yeah, or like I noticed it, but it didn't really ever a big factor. They could have removed it, and I probably wouldn't have any thoughts of it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. It wasn't like immersion breaking where every time it popped up, I wasn't like, oh, this is weird. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't really love the graphics of the characters. Like any cutscene, it felt like it was almost like too goofy looking. Like they were, for me, it reminded me of the, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it reminded me of the old music video of like the Take On Me song where it was like all black and white and everybody was moving throughout it very like, I don't know, jaggedly and kind of glitching through it. So I thought the visuals of the characters and the people was kind of just goofy looking. So
Yeah.
I didn't love that like I did with the driving effects personally.
Yeah, I think the same.
All right, moving into gameplay, which I think is probably the most obvious one when it comes to racing. How did you feel like the game handled? How did like vehicles handle, mechanics, movement, stuff like that?
I thought it was really fun. I think the racing in this game was really smooth, and it felt very fun to drive different cars because every car felt different, which was fun. Especially drifting. Drifting was a lot of fun for me, but it was easier in the middle of the game than it was at the end of the game, because at the end of the game you're using multiple cars because there's multiple races for different grades of car. There's like an S plus race, a S race, an A plus race. And then when you start using the multiple cars, you have totally different drifting styles, which was it was really cool, but it was difficult for me because my first car was, you know, I would just tap the left trigger brake button and I would be able to drift easily. Then my next car was like that didn't work well, but double tapping the gas pedal would drift really well for me. And then I got used to that. And then my last car was like, it was way too fast. My S Plus car was way too fast to do either of those, so I had to do a hard brake to drift. So then when I was intermixing all four cars that I had at the end of the game, I was like doing all sorts of things, and I was crashing everywhere, and I was like, I don't know how to drift anymore.
No, I agree. I honestly preferred my S, so the second tier car, because it was more of like I think I had a Pontiac Firebird or a GTO, like old blue color muscle car, and it was like over the top drifting where I would basically start hitting the brake, like tap the brake 50 to 100 feet before the corner, and I would just slide around it, and I got way better with that than I did with the Matchbox race car style. So
yeah, I think mine, it was the BMW i8, and it was like a good middle balance of, it's a really fast car, but I can also do a lot of cool drifts with it. Whereas my S Plus car was just too fast. It was just better for straightaways.
But yeah, really like the car handling. I think once you get the drift down, because it's tough and frustrating at first, but once you figure out how to do it, it's very, very fun because you can time it well, where every computer user basically tries to take like the wide corners so that they can keep their speed going, but if you can drift around them, that's where you make all your time back. So it was very, very satisfying. And I liked that a lot. It felt natural despite like the cartoony effects. It felt like the driving was pretty accurate, so I liked that. Kind of going off of that with the haptic feedback, like my favorite part was depending on what car you had, and if you had a 6-speed or a 4-speed engine or whatever, you could feel the gear shifts clicking in the right trigger. So I like that. Now back-to-back games we've played where they've actually used haptic feedback.
You are now 4.2 miles from your destination.
Sorry, car.
You are now 1 mile from your destination.
That gets his back, Dom.
Especially like at the high speeds. Like when I got to my S Plus car that was like going 200, 210, 220, I could feel my controller like shaking as I'm trying not to lose control and like flip it. So
Still a bus then.
music and sound, there is a playlist. There were a few songs that were pretty memorable, which we will get into, but I think you have some thoughts on this one, so I'll let you take it.
Well, there is a playlist.
So that's why I can say it.
Yeah, I don't know. So there's I don't know what it is with Need for Speed games lately. I think it's probably hard to get licenses for music, and that's probably the biggest issue. You know, you can't just go out spending a whole bunch of money on licenses to get good music. So there's a lot of random music. You know, I think that's one reason why they brought in A$AP Rocky to this game is, you know, they can have A$AP Rocky in the game, and then they can have some of his music, but I think it just missed the mark. You know, I think his role in the game didn't really make sense, and then the music that they had for it in the game, it was not memorable to me. You know, and I'm thinking of, you know, back in the day when, you know, there was Need for Speed Most Wanted, when you're doing a race to like Decadence by Disturbed. So yeah, that's kind of one thing I wish they would do a little more of. The songs that they had in this game, there's a few that are good, don't get me wrong. There's a few that are really good songs and I really enjoyed listening to, but there's not many that I liked racing to. And I swear if I have to hear one more time.
There were a couple of songs that just like irritated me as soon as they came on and took me out of the racing moment. So we'll cover our least favorites in a bit, but yeah, it was a few good ones, but overall for the game being like an artsy style or like focus directive, as far as racing games go, I was hoping for more in the music. And then last but certainly absolutely least, the writing, dialogue, and voice acting section. So
oh boy.
Yeah, take it away.
Well, it sucked.
Yep.
It wasn't good. They just so many cheesy lines. You know, we were in a 3-game stretch of Dead Space being a horror game, and then we're doing this one, and then we're going to do a horror game next. And I don't think we would have realized that the biggest horror game is the dialogue of this one.
In the building.
This car's straight fire, yeah?
So here we are. No, it's like they did a PG, not even PG-13 version of Fast and Furious as an after-school special.
Yeah, you like that I put that in there?
I didn't read it until now.
Yeah. It was bad. An after-school special of Fast and the Furious where it was just like,
you're never gonna beat a rocket-powered car with an engine Cisco found at the dump.
Hey, this engine is solid, all right? The fuel hose just got loose. Nothing a little bubblegum can't fix.
It's gonna take more than bubblegum if you want to try to beat my best time.
Dom's back!
What's up, Doc?
that just killed me at times. Like half the time I had something else like playing in the background when it was like the dialogue and key cut stuff. I'm just like, I don't care. So that, or the like when you were in the middle of the races, like I feel like they had a potential to make it be more rivalries with the whole side betting, or how they had like different character racers background stories. Like I was hoping for more of that, but instead it was like you'd race and whoever you picked as the one person to bet against, as soon as they'd pass you, they'd be like, ha ha, eat my dust, and then you'd pass them and be like, oh, you're not gonna be there for long. And I'm like, it just felt very generic, like taunting, and it wasn't what I hoped. Like I'm glad they added some kind of dialogue in it, so it wasn't just a race, but you could have done more with it. So that was kind of disappointing.
You think I'm gonna let you get away from my money from me? And it's like, dude, you're 2,000 miles away.
I just ran you off the road. You haven't even started moving yet. I'm gonna lap you. Like, yeah. And then like even the main character ones, since 90% of your conversations were on like a phone call as you were heading out from the garage, it was basically like two different characters. They each said one thing. One was like, well, we got to be winning more money for the race this weekend. Insert qualifier number here. Or it was like, hey kid, don't worry about it. Like, just got to believe and make sure that you just keep working hard to be a good person. I'm like, okay, I already know what you're gonna say. I don't even need to answer the call. So. Not a fan. Yeah, it was rough, which I guess we kind of figured. It wasn't like it was a letdown, but rounding up all of those categories, as we mentioned in our last episode, we're going to do every single time with our rankings. So as a refresher, we have pass, which basically just means don't play this ever. Sale, which means, yeah, I mean, get it, I guess, just wait for like a Christmas or a Black Friday type of discount. Full price, where it's worth the value and you should just put it on your list at some point, or must play, which means bump it to the front of the line. So where are you at for this one?
I think this one's, it's not a pass. I think this one's, definitely good enough to play. It's fun. The racing's a lot of fun. It's just the story and the dialogue that's just, and the music that just brings it down quite a lot. But, if this one's on sale, definitely pick it up. I think it's a good race. If you want to play a racing game, street racing game, I think it's definitely enjoyable. This was 12 hours for us and we got it on sale. Yeah. And so, yeah, was it worth it? Yeah, it was worth it.
Yeah, I think I'm right in between pass and sale, to be honest. I think the way you said it is good, where if you want a racing game, or if maybe you like other racing games, it's worth spending $20 or whatever to play it, kind of thing. But like, I'd also totally understand passing this, where you're not going to miss out by having not played this. So it's very dependent on what kind of genre you like. If you don't go for the racing styles, I wouldn't feel bad if you missed on this. So that's my take. Perfect. Well, everybody, stay tuned. Whenever you're listening to this, we appreciate it. If you want to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, leave a comment of any thoughts that you thought while watching some of our Need for Speed gameplay, or if there's any games you want to see in the future, let us know, because we are very excited to get started on it.
Bye.
Bye.